My new book, Awake, Observe, Shape, Transform, is now available on Amazon, along with the 90-day transformation journal. You'll find a link to these things in the episode description. Also, if you'd like to support this work, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers with no locked content, just a way to say I value this. You can also visit the site and check out the growing merch store, shirts, tanks, hats, and learn about one-on-one sessions with me by clicking the About button. And don't forget, the YouTube page has the podcast and binaural beats for meditation, rest, and sleep. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and today we're going to talk about a book that has been my guide for life for the last 29 years. It is my understanding of how to live on earth. When people say things to me like, I wish there was a manual for how to live, I always think, well, there is. We're talking about the Bhagavad Gita, which means the Song of God. But more specifically, what we're talking about is what this book actually says beneath the surface, because it's not just a dialogue between a warrior and God. It's a map of the mind. It's a blueprint for inner transformation. And this isn't basic. This isn't about the ego. This is about the small self, the scared, fragmented, confused, conscious mind, and its relationship to the divine mind, the superconscious mind that already knows the truth. It is the mind of God. Arjuna, the warrior, is you. Your everyday mind, the part of you that tries to do the right thing, that doubts, that struggles, that panics. And Krishna, his charioteer, is not just God. He represents the divine mind, the higher knowing, the timeless awareness that speaks when the conscious mind is finally quiet enough to listen. Krishna is the conduit that brings the message from the higher self, the self so inextricably connected to God that you could say that it is God. So let's finally do it. The Bhagavad Gita, the inner battle between the small self and the divine mind. I've told this story before, so bear with me, but in 1996, I was 20 years old. I had all but turned my back on my faith, on the church, and thanks to a subculture that I was steeped in at the time, the punk scene, I was exposed to the Hare Krishnas, the Krishna consciousness movement, the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, which is really a subset of Vaishnavism, which is a sect of Hinduism that specifically worships the member of their trinity called Vishnu, that is understood to be the aspect of God, of source, that is its sustaining aspect. But I was turned on to all of this through a band called Shelter. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, then you've seen me share the stories or posts of some of these members, usually accompanied by me saying, I'm not here without them. And that statement is wholly accurate. There is no version of this birth where I'm here doing what I do on this podcast, through these books, in the recovery centers and mental health facilities, without Shelter. So in 1996, I was working at Pier 1 Imports. I'm reading a book called The Science of Self-Realization by the man that brought the Krishna consciousness movement to the West. His name is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So I'm sitting in the back on my break, and this old lady, Linda, walks by and goes, "Oh, you like Krishna?" I was like, I don't know, I guess. And then she asked if I'd ever read the Bhagavad Gita, and I said, no, what's that? So the next day, she brought me a copy of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, which is the Gita with Prabhupada's commentary. It's the one that you read when you are a Hare Krishna. It's the ISKCON recommended copy. Well, she signed it and dated it, and then she gave it to me, and I still have it to this day. Now, what's crazy is that this is pre-internet. It's 1996. It's South Florida. The chances of me having this encounter with this lady, Linda, in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida in the 90s is slim to none. To this day, I believe it was destiny. It's one of those moments when you zoom out on your life and you see that it's all connected, that every little step, every turn, every choice isn't a choice at all. It's just part of your journey home, or at least that's how I see things for me. As Prabhupada would say, it's my journey back to Godhead. So since then, I've read all sorts of commentaries and translations, and all I can say is that if you want to know what to do, how to behave, how to approach life, the Bhagavad Gita has the answer. Now, this obviously isn't the only book I've read, and certainly isn't the only book that has taught me anything, but I will say that this is my foundation. So the Bhagavad Gita sits inside of the longest epic ever written in human history, the Mahabharata, which was composed over centuries, possibly between 400 BCE and 200 CE. But it's timeless. Maybe one day I'll do an episode on it. I don't know. It's a lot. I still think it should be an awesome action movie. I wish somebody would do it. But the Bhagavad Gita itself is only 18 chapters. It's 700 verses, but they are dense with symbolism, with instruction, with meaning. And in those verses, a dialogue unfolds between Arjuna, the warrior, and Krishna, who at first Arjuna just thinks is his loyal cousin, that he has a lot of respect for, as a ruler of a kingdom and a statesman, but then later realizes that Krishna is an incarnation or emanation of Vishnu, of God. So the Gita opens up with Arjuna and Krishna looking out onto the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And it's not just any battlefield, of course. It's the battlefield of Dharma. It represents duty. It represents the mind. And that matters because this isn't about war in the literal sense, right? It's a very, Krishna advocates war in this book, but you have to dig deeper. This is about the confrontation between a spiritual aspirant's desire for change and their past, their habits, right? Their desire for a better life and the current popular culture. It's about the war within the mind. And the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna is an allegory for the divine mind trying to get through to the scared small self that's afraid to fight these battles. It's afraid to let go of the world. And one of the things I find magical about the Bhagavad Gita is how it has quietly seeped out into other things throughout history. One of the most fascinating examples is that the fact that transcendentalists like Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, both fell in love with it. Thoreau literally said that every morning he would bathe his intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonical philosophy of the Gita. And Emerson referred to it as one of the most sublime dialogues known to man. This wasn't cultural tourism. They saw something eternal in it. They saw their own inner conflict reflected back to them, and they respected it. And you know what? I think we're being called to do the same now. It doesn't take years to read. It doesn't require mental gymnastics or cultural context to understand it. It doesn't require apologists like Wes Huff to go into a podcast and explain what it really means. There's no controversy around the translations. It just is. If you read it, take it literally, you'll get a lot out of it. If you read it and understand the allegory, it'll blow your mind. So, I could talk about the Gita for hours, but I'm going to do my best to be concise and clear here. You know how I can be. But I think I want to give you some backstory first, of course. So when the Bhagavad Gita opens up, it's referencing a lot of people from the Mahabharata. So I'm going to do my best to explain the longest epic ever written relatively quickly for the sake of this episode. So, Arjuna is one of 5 brothers, all with divine origin, which I will leave as a vague statement because it's simply too much to get into. But their father, Pandu, was a very righteous king, and he died while being exiled in the forest, which is another story. Anyway, his brother Dhritarashtra, who is blind, there's your first metaphor, took over after Pandu's death. Dhritarashtra had, I believe, 11 shitty sons, and the shittiest of his sons was Duryodhana. But through a series of tricks, deceit, the Pandus, Arjuna and his 5 brothers were exiled to the forest with their singular wife. Yes, they only had one wife, which is also too much to explain here, but her name was Draupadi, and she is also a major figure and hero of the story. Either way, they come back to fight their cousins known as the Kurus. By the way, the 5 brothers are the Pandavas, the sons of Pandu. But they're returning with all these armies that loved and respected their father, while the Kurus were supported by everyone else, just everyone that didn't like Pandu, which was, some people. So let's look at the first moral of the story when it comes to the Mahabharata, which is wisdom frees you and morality binds you. And this means that wisdom only knows the present moment. It can only answer questions about how things are right now. And morality tries to create policies that will ensure a favorable outcome consistently, which we all know doesn't work. So when we say morality, what we really mean is policy. Morals are policies that allow us the illusion of safety. We've all worked somewhere where the people up above us created a new policy that, while on paper, would be great, but it doesn't work on the ground, right? These sorts of corporate power structures attempt to create what they call a corporate culture centered around some fucking mission statement, which is essentially a makeshift moral compass for the company. It's a set of morals for the corporation which attempts to create some sort of loyalty and a sense of safety for the powers that be. Because, if we're all adhering to the mission statement, then the upper management drones can sleep sound at night knowing that their vacation home and their country club membership are safe. So these things usually later become ammunition to release or separate, as they say, a hardworking employee from their income. Look, Bill, this isn't personal. It's just the policy. It's just business, right? So we see this in the Mahabharata with characters like Bhishma and Drona. In fact, we see similar conundrums play out in the Ramayana, where someone has made a promise to do something, but when it came time to fulfill the promise, they were forced to fulfill the promise under circumstances that put them on the wrong side of history, which, since they're being quote unquote moral, they had to do it, right? Just following orders. Wisdom frees you, morality or policy binds you. So help me God, right? And when you find yourself on the wrong side of things, right? Remember, you promised, right? You don't agree with this? Well, you promised. You want the benefits, don't you? You want the illusion of security, don't you? Just sign on the line and you won't have to work like the rest of these schlubs out here. Just fill out your contract and you can go home. So what happens in the Mahabharata, Bhishma and Drona swore to fight for the kingdom no matter what. Well, they made that promise when the kingdom was righteous. They promised to defend it while Pandu was king, because they could have never imagined a time when Dhritarashtra, the blind, incompetent brother of Pandu, would be king, much less a king, and allow his evil, shitty son to run amok. So that's the moral of the story when it comes to the Mahabharata. And that's why you have these great heroes fighting for essentially the bad guys, right? So wisdom knows the present and can only make promises based on what it knows. And that is the thing that frees you. That doesn't mean you get out of doing the right thing. In fact, that means that you do the right thing no matter what the fucking policy is, no matter what the rules are, you do the right thing no matter what, and that frees you. morality, policy, allegiance to those things, that enslaves you, right? Look, man, I didn't write the law. I just enforce it. We're a nation of laws. Well, isn't that convenient? Now you don't have to think for yourself. That's fucking perfect. That's perfect for you. So the Bhagavad Gita opens up at the start of the Battle of Kurukshetra, the battlefield of the Kurus. The brothers are here to reclaim the kingdom. So let's get into the allegory. The battlefield represents the mind, the chariot represents the body, the horses are the senses, Arjuna is the scared small self, the conscious mind or the carnal mind, and Krishna is the superconscious mind, the divine mind, the higher self. He is God. Now, Bhishma, Drona, all of the names mentioned at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita on the opposite side of the battlefield essentially represent the past. And this battlefield is the mind of the spiritual aspirant, the mind of anyone seeking a better life, trying to change themselves for the better, right? Every day they must go to war with the past. So as the Gita opens, we have Krishna and Arjuna overlooking this battlefield. Arjuna is in awe of the warriors gathered there, ready to fight. So he asks Krishna to take him down to the battlefield to kind of survey the landscape one last time. So Krishna takes him down. Arjuna takes one look at Bhishma and Drona, who were his teachers, his grandfather, his guru, and he just loses it. He falls to the floor of the chariot, drops his bow, remember that, and begins to cry. The scared small self just collided with the past. It has left the realm of just talking about change and is now realizing that this is real. Arjuna begins to list all these reasons why he can't fight, why he shouldn't fight. Now remember, they have known that this war was going to happen. This isn't a shock. Things were going to come to a head. There was going to be a battle. This isn't coming out of nowhere. They talked about it. In fact, as a little side note, Krishna vowed not to fight in the battle. In fact, he vowed only to charioteer and not to raise his arms and fight. However, Bhishma, on the other hand, made a vow of his own. He vowed to kill Arjuna and force Krishna to fight. Now, as this story is told, only the wisest characters in this entire epic knew that Krishna was God. In fact, one of those people is the wife of the Pandavas, Draupadi. She knew that Krishna was God and was actually a devotee of Krishna. There's a story in the Mahabharata where the Kurus have her in the palace and they're going to strip her naked in public. But she prayed to Krishna, and Krishna made her clothing infinite. So the Kurus pulled at her clothing at her sari, but there was just never-ending fabric, so she was never naked, just a pile of silk. There's a saying that if Krishna wants you dead, no one can save you. But if Krishna wants you to live, no one can kill you. Now, interestingly enough, another person that knew that Krishna was the Lord was Bhishma. Now, a lot of this stuff isn't apparent in these stories, and that's why it requires a qualified teacher to teach them. You see, when you first read the Gita, for instance, the lessons, they're right there and they're great. But once you understand the deeper meaning, the allegory of the Gita in context of the Mahabharata, the world opens up. There are levels to this shit, as the kids would say. Well, Bhishma was such an amazing warrior that he was absolutely laying waste to the Pandava army. He was destroying everyone in front of him. But when he got to Arjuna, he was holding back. So much so, in fact, that Duryodhana, one of the 100 sons, the main antagonist of the story, begins to accuse Bhishma of failing to follow the Dharma, the law. Bhishma vowed to fight and was now being accused of not keeping the vow, which was something adharmic or anti-dharma. So he ramps up his attacks on Arjuna. Now, something to understand about Bhishma is that he at no point believes that he can defeat Arjuna. He knows with certainty that Arjuna is going to kill him. A, because Arjuna is an amazing warrior, and B, because he has Krishna. Remember, Bhishma knows that Krishna is God, and Bhishma is actually a devotee of Krishna. but he's being forced to fight against the Lord. But at the same time, he's eager to die this way, right? The past will always be swallowed up by the divine mind if we listen to the divine mind, right? The past, those old habits, they will be swallowed up. Ultimately, it's the duty of the human being to recognize its identity as the soul, as the self, as Atman, right? This entire system, life itself, is designed for that. So it's only natural that our past would be eager to die to the present moment, to the divine mind, that it would sacrifice itself to wisdom. That's part of this. But, here we are, it's 2025. This is why it's so unbelievably dangerous that some in our culture are eager to rid the system, to rid the world of religion and God, regardless of what religion or method of relating to God. So it's a little digression. Now, on Arjuna's end, he's also being accused of not fighting hard enough by Krishna. The scared small self is afraid of the past. It has too much reverence for it. It is attached to the past. So Arjuna, he ramps up his fighting against Bhishma. Now, why would Bhishma want to force Krishna to fight if Krishna took this vow and made this promise? Why would Bhishma want to force Krishna into a sinful adharmic situation? Well, because he loves Arjuna. Bhishma loves Arjuna, and he wants Arjuna to see that Krishna, that God will do anything for his devotee and will protect him no matter what. Because morality, policies, promises, whatever you call it, is transcended by wisdom. It is transcended by God. The divine mind is wisdom. God transcends policy. Well, Bhishma begins to beat Arjuna so badly that Krishna is enraged at the destruction that Bhishma is inflicting on everything in front of him, not just Arjuna, but the Pandavas as a whole. But he's so pissed off that Arjuna won't just end Bhishma that Krishna's like, fuck it, I'll do it myself. Because remember, this is how he's been accusing Arjuna, right, of not fighting. So again, he's forced in a way, right? He's accusing Arjuna of not doing this with his whole heart. The divine mind is urging you toward your destiny, but you're so attached to the past, to what's familiar, to the policies of the culture, that you won't let go of the side of the pool and swim out into the deep end and find out what you can do, whatever it is, right? So Krishna leaps from the chariot, breaks off a wheel, and rushes at Bhishma, about to crush Bhishma's skull in with his massive wheel. But before he can do that, Arjuna runs. He stops him and he reminds him of the promise that he made. Please don't wield weapons. Do not break your promise, right? Seeing that Krishna would break his own laws for Arjuna because he loves him so much, Arjuna promised to fight with all his heart if Krishna would put the wheel down. So, speed things up a bit. Krishna stops, puts the wheel down. Arjuna absolutely fills Bhishma with fucking arrows. Just riddles him with arrows. In this story, Bhishma is filled with so many arrows that he is suspended off the ground on this bed of arrows. But Bhishma is also a very powerful yogi. So he lays there, still alive, and waits so that he can drop his body at the right celestial moment, when everything is in its proper position. And in the meantime, out of respect for Bhishma, the fighting stops. They all gather round. And at one point, Arjuna shoots an arrow into the ground next to Bhishma, and Krishna makes a fountain of water come out so that Bhishma can have a drink. Then Bhishma eventually dies, and violence ensues. So let's get back to the Bhagavad Gita. I think I did a good job of taking the world's largest epic and I hope I did a good job. I'm not listening back to it. I'm just going to go with it. Whatever. But Krishna and Arjuna are looking out over the battlefield of Kurukshetra when Arjuna drops his Gandiva bow, falls to the floor of the chariot. He's sobbing and saying that to fight would be wrong. To kill Bhishma and the others is wrong. We've gone back in time. When the scared small self thinks about leaving the past behind, old habits, even people behind, there is a fear. And that fear is the fear of being lost in the desert, exiled to the forest alone, having to figure it out again. It's the mind's fear of the loss of the familiar pattern. Remember, the mind will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven if we allow it. So this chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita is often referred to as the yoga of dejection. Dejection means to be sad, in a depressed, low state. What's fascinating is that it comes from the Latin word which means to throw down. So what we have is Arjuna drops his Gandiva bow and falls to the floor. He drops his ability to fight against the past and lets go of his ability to liberate himself from the past, his weapon. Now, a lot of people live in that state. A lot of people have dropped their bow and refused to fight against their past, their habits, whatever it is. They have decided that it is too much to fight, so they just kneel and weep. This is an important moment. Arjuna, the scared small self, has given to crying on the floor and is completely dejected. There are no other options, no more reservations, no more diplomacy. The battle is here. He was okay to fight until this moment, until he finally saw the magnitude of the situation. Remember, it always feels good to say noble shit. So what does it mean, this yoga of dejection? Well, it means that for many, they will not be able to hear the truth until they have found themselves in a sufficiently low enough state, thrown down. They will not come into union with the truth, with God, or with the knowledge of the presence of God or the truth until they have given up fighting with it. Because it is at this point that Krishna, the divine mind, speaks the science of this union, the truth of yoga, our connection to God, to Arjuna. He is bringing Arjuna into union with the truth. Arjuna is coming into union with God, but this only happens for him when in this dejected state, the yoga of dejection. Now, Krishna has always been in the lives of the Pandavas, the 5 brothers. They took his advice from time to time, but really they just saw him as their really cool cousin, right? Their mother Kunti was Krishna's aunt. Kunti was Vasudeva, Krishna's dad's sister. But as Krishna first tells Arjuna to pull it together, essentially, and then begins to speak this cosmic truth to Arjuna, that's when Arjuna realizes that Krishna is an emanation of Lord Vishnu, the sustaining aspect of God, that Krishna is God. That is to say that in that moment, Arjuna is realizing that the voice of God has been in his ear this whole time. At this point, Arjuna is very apologetic to Krishna, saying that he's sorry if he ever spoke to him just as a regular person, if he ever farted in front of him, whatever. But then Krishna tells Arjuna something very interesting. He says these things. He explains to Arjuna that the wisest of sages know him, Krishna, to be their own divine self. He also states, "You are all my parts and parcels." So let's go back to the allegory and remember, this is about the spiritual aspirant. So the chariot is the body of the aspirant. The horses are the senses of the spiritual aspirant. Arjuna is the scared small self, or the conscious mind, or the carnal mind. Krishna represents the higher self, the superconscious mind, the divine mind, as we say. The opposing army, the Kurus, represent the past. The battlefield is the mind. So this opens up with the fear and worry of the spiritual aspirant, or anyone really trying to affect change in their lives, as they must do battle with their old habits, with their history. So Arjuna, recognizing Krishna's divinity, is the realization that the guidance, the truth, has been there with us this entire time. But often, unfortunately, we have to become completely dejected, thrown down, to hear the truth, to become awake. The divine mind, Krishna, is trying to guide the conscious mind, the scared small self, Arjuna, to its destiny by defeating the past, the old habits, the Kurus, in the mind. The Kurus in the mind, the battlefield of Kurukshetra, it's all happening in the mind. The Kurus of the past. The war takes place internally. The defeat of Bhishma by Arjuna is the scared small self finding the strength to finally defeat the past, but still having reverence for it by acknowledging its role in getting the spiritual aspirant to the place that he or she is at. That's the whole thing, right? It was only by Bhishma's tutelage that Arjuna was able to survive that battle. You don't get an Arjuna without a Bhishma. You don't find content, happiness, love without the trials of the past. But before Arjuna beats him, before he beats Bhishma, he gets the knowledge of the science of karma yoga from Krishna. The truth gave Arjuna the bravery he needed to overcome the past. That's the Bhagavad Gita. It's the science and understanding that allows us to go into the mind, the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and go to war every single day with our lives, with our past, with our habits, our urges, our emotions. So, what is it exactly that the Bhagavad Gita is teaching us? Well, it starts with karma yoga, the path of non-attached action. So, before we go further, I'd like to say the Gita predates Buddhism, right? Buddha would have been very familiar with the Gita. You'll notice that it sounds very Buddhist-y, or that Buddhism sounds very Bhagavad Gita-y. And I mention this because having had a long history with the Hare Krishnas, I'd sit there with my Buddhist Sangha in a town that at the time boasted having the largest congregation of Hare Krishnas on the North American continent. These Buddhists would sit around poking fun at it all, and I'd, of course, just sit there quietly. I wasn't this confident at the time, and think to myself, clearly you haven't read the Bhagavad Gita. It's literally the same thing. So, sorry. Anyway, karma yoga. So karma yoga is learning to let go of the outcome. You see, the small self is obsessed with results. It wants a return, it wants a policy, it wants a reward, a guarantee, policies and morals that will guarantee the desired outcome, whatever it is. But Krishna tells Arjuna, you have a right to the action, but not a right to the fruits of your actions. That is a radical reframe. He's saying, move, act, serve, love, but release your grip on what comes back. That is terrifying for the small self. But the divine mind knows that true peace can only happen when we act from alignment, not out of addiction or addiction to the outcome, right? Imagine what your life would look like if you just showed up honestly, completely, and left the rest in God's hands or the higher self, whatever. That's karma yoga. Next would be jnana yoga, the path of wisdom and true identity. This is where Krishna tells Arjuna, you are not this body. You are not this mind. You are not these emotions. You are eternal. You are the self. You are Brahma. This small self clings to identity like it's life or death. And, from an evolutionary psychological place, it actually is life or death for the organism, for the meat suit. Historically, if you didn't have your identity or it was called into question, you'd be punished and pushed outside of the village or the tribe, and that meant certain death. I've talked about this before, but if I make baskets in this tribe, in this village, then I need you to see me as the basket maker, right? That's not only my personal identity, but that's also my personal importance. It gives me value. The role of basket maker gives me value in the eyes of the tribe. It separates me from everyone else. And again, that separateness, that difference gives me value. That's the ego. What's ego? Personal importance, personal identity, and reality testing, which simply means that my mind believes that I'm separate from everything else. So when we talk about going to war with the past, it doesn't get much more past than our evolutionary psychology, right? So in our much more recent past, the Bhishma that we fight is, I am this job. I am this relationship. I am this trauma. I am this story. But the divine mind says, no, you are awareness itself. Jnana Yoga is not intellectual, it's experiential. It's the moment you realize that the thoughts you're having are not you. They are appearing to you, right? When the mind races, who is aware that the mind is racing? I am. Who is I am in that answer? Well, it's awareness. I am aware that the mind is racing. I am awareness and the mind is racing. I am aware of the phenomena occurring, which is the thinking of the mind. That realization is Jnana Yoga. Yoga of wisdom, yoga of intellect. You use the thinking mind to think about the mind, see the mind for what it is, and at the end of your time here in this body, that all's supposed to dissolve. So while shamatha became mindfulness meditation and pranayama became cardiac coherent breath work, karma became CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, Jnana Yoga became known as metacognition. Then all of these academics patted each other on the back for realizing something new and wrote papers about it. So isn't that wonderful? So the last system of yoga that Krishna enunciates to Arjuna is bhakti yoga, the path of devotion. So within the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells us that above all else, there is love. If the small self can't understand philosophy, if it can't meditate for 20 minutes, if it forgets every technique, the small self can offer itself in love to the divine mind, to God, to seeing God in all things, then if it can do that, it's already free. That is bhakti, devotion. Not the sentimental love of greeting cards, but the fierce, surrendered love of a soul who knows it can't do this alone anymore, right? It needs something. This is why the Gita isn't elitist. It doesn't require intellect or perfection or a lot of, like I said, gymnastics. It requires sincerity. Just love the truth. Offer your actions, offer your struggle, offer your life. That's the most direct path to dissolving the illusion of separateness. So what we learn in the Bhagavad Gita is that God is within and without. That spark is inside of every living thing, and that bhakti, devotion to that spark, is a path in and of itself. However, it's hard to see everyone as God, and maybe you're not meant to. Who knows? So start with your dog. Start with your mom, your wife, your husband, your friends, or even yourself. Krishna says that even the illusion of Maya is him, right? This is all God. Like Krishna says, whatever you worship, you are worshiping me. And he says that because Krishna, Vishnu, is the aspect of source, God, the universe that sustains life. It is all God. I love you. Stay awake. Thank you. If the infinite spark of being has brought you any value, consider supporting the work. And you can do that by checking out Awake and the 90-Day Transformation Journal, both now available on Amazon. The links are in the description. If you want to support this work on a monthly basis, there are $10, $15, and $20 Patreon tiers that have no locked content yet, just support. You can also swing by the website, check out the merch store, learn more about working with me one-on-one, and as always, the YouTube page has full episodes as well as binaural beats to help you with your practice. So I'll see you next week. Thank you, and I love you.